How's it going, guys? Second vlog for today. This one's kind of interesting and just something I learned in the leadership course that I was taking. But it's a appreciative inquiry theory. Now, to sum it up, it is to focus on the good rather than the bad. So when you have a situation that's occurring and there's a couple things that aren't going well, rather than focus on the things that aren't going well, you focus on doing more of the things that are going well. One of the examples that I saw was this hotel that was being built across from a hospital, and it was to be able to give the people who had prolonged family visits at the hospital a place to stay. So when they opened it up, they renovated it, this hotel, and used the same staff. Uh, they used the same staff of the original hotel because it was kind of a rundown hotel. So they used the original staff to run the new renovated hotel, and they ended up doing a terrible job. So they brought in this professor who used an appreciative inquiry theory, and what he did was take that staff to a five-star hotel, and they were just allowed to focus on the things that focus on the things that were going right. They weren't allowed to talk about any of the things that were going wrong at this hotel, and they weren't allowed to talk about their hotel. So when they get back to their hotel, they start implementing all these things that they saw that were going right, and they took that hotel with bad customer service rep and turned it into a four-star hotel over a short period of time. So I find that very fascinating because they did focus on the good things and the good aspects of the five-star hotel and be able to reciprocate that in their own environment. So I'll share with you a piece now that I wrote for my class and let you know, because we were supposed to choose a current impasse or conflict about which I'm aware of, and write a one-page or less opinion about how I suggest appreciative inquiry theory could be used to positively change the difficulty. So, and this has to be something that is very hard to surpass. So the one I picked to talk about was speed limit. So I'll read you the paper that I wrote for this topic. So I said my conflict is one that I hold near and dear, but do understand to a certain extent. The conflict is none other than speed limits. Those that are particular of interest to me are ones imposed on highways. But after doing my research, I started to figure out why we don't operate like the German Autobahn, which by the way has far fewer accidents per year. And this is where I think appreciative inquiry might work best. Maybe we should mimic the good of what's going on in Germany and replicate that here in the US. Continue reading here. So there are a few key points that I will go over as to why speed limits are so heavily imposed here in the US, and these are, again, all my opinion. So first is that it's way too easy to get a driver's license here in the US. It is much harder than in Germany, and they conduct high-speed testing in Germany as well to make sure that you can properly handle your car at high speeds. Here in the US, we don't test remotely above high speeds. Typically, when you take a driver's test, I think you're lucky if you get to 50 miles per hour, but anything above that is for sure not going to happen, at least in my experience and in my opinion. So secondly is the use of a passing lane. So here in the US, you will constantly see people driving in the passing lane, even if there is no one to the right of them, as if there's just another lane of travel. In Germany, they religiously obey the lane rules and stay as far right as possible unless they're passing. Third is our own American culture to blame. So we are groomed to believe that there isn't much necessity to drive excessively fast and that it is unsafe to do so. Add that to our general sense of entitlement, best expressed by a large SUV or minivan doing 10 miles per hour below the posted speed limit in the passing lane, and you can clearly see that it is in fact our culture. So in addition lies the road construction. In Germany, the highways are meticulously maintained and they use higher grade materials for the roads, making them safer for the general public. In the US, road construction is sold to the lowest bidder, and driving around the US, you can see torn up highways that are improperly maintained, resulting in even lower speed limits being imposed. All the things are part of the reason that speed limits are so heavily imposed here in the US, but it upsets me that in the land of the free and home of the brave, we can't even drive responsibly enough to have sections of highways that have no speed limits. Maybe using appreciative inquiry theory to take from the good practices of Germany and implement them here will be a step in the right direction. And again, this is all my own opinion and my own writings, but that's kind of the gist of what I wanted to say and be able to tackle a problem here that, and again, I get both sides of the coin, but we're groomed to believe certain things. And if you look at the statistical comparisons between the U.S. and Germany, there's far fewer crashes on their highways than there are here, but it's just a matter of being a better trained driver in that atmosphere and truly respecting the laws of the road whenever it comes to operating your vehicle. So those are just a couple things I wanted to say. I didn't want to bash on the U.S. Or these streets here. I've never had a chance to drive on the Autobahn, so I don't know how crazy or how normal it may be, but I'm just looking at the statistics from a point of view, and they seem to be doing something right. And I think whenever you're trying to implement that appreciative inquiry theory, you have to mimic the right things that they are doing, and maybe we can have better drivers, safer drivers, and increase or lower our fatalities and accidents within the roadways. A perfect example was this guy from California. I was reading an article about him, and he said that there was far more accidents in California highways at substantially lower speeds. I'm talking about, sub 40 miles an hour. Just far more accidents, and it wasn't because people weren't following speed limits. It's just people don't necessarily know how to drive or be responsible for driving at certain speeds, and even at the lower speeds doesn't make a huge difference. But here in the U.S., there are speed limits pretty much everywhere, unless you're driving on some back county road. But if I'm not mistaken, there are speed limits for those areas as well. But I do think that we might be able to learn a thing or two from the way that Germany operates and be able to bring that mentality over here, or, at least in my theory, it might be able to help get a step in the right direction towards making our roads safer and easier to navigate. And I think it would be a good thing overall. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys in reference to appreciative inquiry theory. I appreciate you guys watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and I will see you on the next one.